My name is Thea Lindgren. I'm 32. Last Saturday, at my sister's wedding reception, 200 guests watched a screen light up with 6 words about me: infertile, divorced, failure, high school dropout, broke, alone. And then everyone laughed. My dad lifted his glass like it was a toast. My mom calmly swirled her wine like she was enjoying a normal evening. My sister leaned into the mic and said, "Don't laugh too hard. She might actually cry." They thought that was the worst thing that could happen to me that night. They were wrong, because I was holding my phone in my hand, and I typed one word, just one. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand why that word changed everything. But before I get to that moment, I need to take you back. 15 years earlier, I was 17, junior year. I had a 3.6 GPA and college brochures on my desk, with my future carefully planned out. When I came home from school that day, something felt off. The house was too quiet. My mom, Gloria, was at the kitchen table going through papers. My dad, Ray, was sitting in his chair pretending to watch TV. My sister, Vanessa, 13, was upstairs with her music turned up loud. My mom didn't even say hello. She just said, "Sit down, Thea." She slid a brochure across the table: Whitmore Academy, a private school 40 minutes away. "Vanessa got accepted," she said. "We're sending her there in the fall." I looked at the cost. It was $14,000 a year. "That's my college fund," I said. My mom didn't even blink. "We already talked about it." "You talked about it without me?" My dad finally spoke, still not looking at me. "Vanessa needs it more. She's struggling. You'll be fine. You always figure things out." That was it. My future, just taken and given away. Those were birthday checks from my grandparents, Christmas money, every dollar saved for me. "And what about me?" I asked. My mom closed the folder like the conversation was finished. "Don't be dramatic." That night, I packed one bag. I had $83 in cash from my drawer. I left my house key on the counter. As I walked out, my mom said, "You'll come back. You always need us." I didn't. I slept on my friend Kayla's couch for 2 months. Her mom worked as a nurse, doing double shifts, and she never asked me to leave. She just left food on the table and said, "Eat." At 18, I got my GED. I walked into a testing center with a pencil and walked out with proof that my life wasn't over. I met Frank Patterson 2 weeks after we submitted the bid. He shook my hand like I was just another client. He didn't recognize me. That was the first small relief I had felt in a long time. "We've heard good things about Crestline," he said. "Clean work, fast turnaround." "Thanks," I replied. "We take pride in it." Jolene sat beside me, quiet, watching everything the way she always did. She didn't interrupt. She didn't push. She just observed. Frank flipped through the proposal, nodded a few times, then said, "We're also bidding on Maplewood Commons. Big project. Competitive." "That's why we're here," Jolene said with a smile. "We don't waste anyone's time." Frank laughed. "Good. I like that." We left the meeting with cautious optimism. Not a win yet, but close enough to feel real. It wasn't until I got back to the office that Jolene said it. "Did you notice something?" I looked from my laptop. "What?" "Frank Patterson. Patterson Construction." I frowned. "So?" She leaned back in her chair. "Vanessa's fiancé is a Patterson." The room went quiet in a way that didn't feel like coincidence anymore. I already knew what was coming before I said it. "Derek." Jolene nodded. For a moment, I didn't speak, not because I was shocked, but because life had a habit of circling back to old wounds like it enjoyed the timing. "I didn't even know his last name," I said finally. "Well," Jolene said, "now you do." And just like that, the past wasn't the past anymore. 2 weeks later, the bid meeting was scheduled. Crestline versus two firms. Final selection would be made after presentations. I didn't tell anyone from my family. I didn't want them involved. I didn't want their opinions, their version of me, their noise. But the universe clearly had other plans. The day of the meeting, I walked into the conference hall and stopped for half a second. Because sitting at the far end of the table was Vanessa. She looked older, softer around the edges. Still my sister, but distant in a way that felt practiced. Next to her was Derek, and across from them, my parents. My mother saw me first. Her expression didn't change right away. It lingered between confusion and recognition, like her brain was refusing to connect the present to the version of me she had decided on years ago. Then it clicked. Thea. Her lips pressed into a thin line. My father leaned toward her and whispered something, but I already knew what it would be. Something dismissive, something tidy. I sat down across from them. No one said my name. The meeting began. Presentations, plans, costs, timelines, numbers on a screen that didn't care who knew who. Frank Patterson spoke confidently about his company's ability to deliver on schedule. Then Jolene presented Crestline's proposal. Clear, sharp, no fluff, no weakness. When she finished, there was a pause. Then Derek leaned in forward. I just want to say, he began, it's interesting seeing new firms try to compete at this level. Experience matters, Astis. Relationships matter. He smiled slightly. Not cruel, just confident. The kind of confidence that comes from never being underestimated. My mother nodded faintly like she agreed with him. My father didn't look at me. Vanessa didn't look at me either. But I was watching all of them. Frank asked a few final questions. Then the meeting ended. No decision yet. They would announce it later that week. As people stood and gathered papers, Vanessa finally looked at me, really looked. For a second, something flickered in her expression. Recognition, confusion, maybe even guilt. Thea, she said quietly. I nodded once, her mouth opened, like she wanted to say more, but Derek placed a hand lightly on her arm. Let's go, he said. And just like that, they walked out. My parents followed. No one stayed behind, except Jolene. She closed her folder and looked at me. Well, she said, that was fun. I almost laughed, almost. But inside, something had already shifted. Because now they weren't just people from my past anymore. They were sitting in the middle of my future. And they still had no idea. The ceremony itself was everything they wanted it to be. Soft music, white flowers, carefully placed smiles. Vanessa looked perfect in a way that felt expensive rather than emotional. Derek stood at the altar like he belonged there, like every step of his life had been building toward this moment. My father did the walk down the aisle like it mattered more than anything he had ever done for me, and I sat in the back row, exactly where I was supposed to be. Unseen, uninvited, really, even though I held an invitation in my bag. Jolene had texted once, "You still good?" I didn't reply. Not yet. The ceremony ended with applause that sounded practiced. People stood, cried at the right moments, hugged at the right times. I stayed seated, because I wasn't here for the wedding, I was here for what came after it. The reception at Oak Ridge Country Club was even more polished. Crystal glasses, soft lighting, a string quartet playing versions of songs people pretended to recognize. My family was already in place when I walked in. My mother spotted me first, her smile tightening just slightly. My father didn't react at all. Vanessa looked surprised, but not enough to stop her from smiling for photos. Derek saw me last. His expression flickered, just for a second, like a file being opened and not fully recognized. You came, Vanessa said when she reached me. Yes, I said. That was all. No hug, no warmth. Just distance carefully maintained on both sides. I took my seat, not at the main table, not even close. Table 7. Near the service entrance. The kind of table you don't notice unless you're looking for people to forget. Jolene wasn't here physically, but I knew she was somewhere behind a laptop screen waiting for one word, begin. Frank Patterson gave a speech first. Loud, proud, already a little too comfortable with success that wasn't fully real yet. He talked about family, partnership, legacy. My mother smiled like she had built it all herself. Then Derek spoke. He was good at it. Of course he was. Today is about connection, he said, lifting his glass. About bringing families together. Strengthening ties that will last generations. He looked at Vanessa when he said it. But I noticed the way his eyes drifted, just once, toward my parents. Because he knew, Even if he didn't know everything, he knew enough. After speeches came food, laughter, music rising slightly louder, the room loosening into celebration. That's when my mother finally approached my table. She sat down without asking. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "You look well," she said finally. I almost laughed at the choice of words. "So do you." She nodded like she approved of that response. Then her voice lowered. "It's good you came. Family matters." I looked at her for a long moment. "You haven't treated me like family in a long time." Her smile tightened again. "That's not fair, Thea. You made your choices." "I made survival choices," I said. "There's a difference." She didn't respond to that. Instead, she leaned in, slightly. "You know," she said, "this wedding is important for all of us. Vanessa is building something stable. Something real. You should be happy for her." "I am," I said flatly. But she wasn't done. "And the Patterson deal," she added carefully. "It's good for everyone involved. We're finally moving forward as a family." That word again. Family. As if it had ever meant the same thing for both of us, she stood up before I could answer. "Try to enjoy yourself," she said. "Don't ruin this for her." Then she walked away. That was the moment everything stopped feeling like a memory and started feeling like a countdown. Across the room, Jolene's system was already in place. Tyler Briggs was at the AV booth, calm, professional, invisible. On stage, the DJ tested the microphone. Derek was laughing with his friends. Vanessa was glowing in the center of it all. And in my pocket, my phone was warm. I opened it. One message from Jolene, ready. No hesitation, no breath held. Just consequence. My thumb hovered over the screen, and I typed one word. The word didn't just appear on the screen. It landed, like the room had been waiting for permission to stop pretending. Infertile. A few people laughed immediately. The kind of laugh people release when they think they're safe to follow the crowd. Then the second word appeared. Divorced. The laughter grew louder. Failure. That one shifted the energy. Not everyone laughed now. Some people looked at each other, checking if this was still allowed. High school dropout. A chair scraped somewhere near the back. Broke. The laughter started to thin. Alone. Silence, finally. Not immediate silence, delayed. The kind that arrives after the brain finishes catching up with what the eyes just saw. And in that silence, I felt something strange. Not shock. Clarity. Vanessa stood at the mic, smiling too tightly, waiting for the reaction she had rehearsed in her head, waiting for applause that didn't come. Across the room, my mother's expression shifted first. Confusion, then something sharper, because she didn't recognize those words as entertainment anymore. She recognized them as damage. And then she looked at me, really looked. For the first time that night, the room wasn't watching Vanessa, it was watching me. I slowly pushed my chair back. It didn't make a sound, but it felt loud anyway. Vanessa laughed into the mic, a nervous, defensive sound. "It's just a joke," she said quickly. "Come on, don't be sensitive." But no one laughed with her this time, not even Derek. His face had gone still, not angry, not amused, just alert. Like he was realizing he had stepped into something he couldn't easily explain his way out of. I reached into my pocket, my phone, still warm. One message sitting there already sent. Begin! Behind the stage, the DJ's booth changed hands without anyone noticing. Tyler Briggs didn't look at the audience when he slid the USB in. He just adjusted the soundboard, calm as a man changing a song. The screen flickered. Vanessa noticed first. "Okay, wait," she said, turning slightly. The slideshow didn't stop. It just changed direction. The words disappeared and were replaced by numbers. Not insults, data. Project budgets, construction timelines, bank projections, Crestline property development, aerial renders of Maplewood Commons filled the screen. Clean, modern, expensive. A project worth millions. A contract worth more than anything Patterson's construction had ever touched. The room shifted again. Confusion now replacing laughter. Frank Patterson leaned forward. "What is this?" Vanessa turned toward the booth. "Stop it, turn it off, this isn't." But the screen kept going. Signed letters of intent, email trails, financial forecasts. And then, a single line appeared in bold. Property development partner. Crestline. My mother went still. My father's smile disappeared completely. Derek stood up, slowly. Not because he understood everything, but because he understood enough to know this wasn't random. Vanessa turned toward me now, fully panicked. "What did you do?" she whispered across the room. I finally stood, not fast, not dramatic, just enough for everyone to see me clearly, and for the first time that night, I wasn't sitting at table 14 anymore. I was the only thing anyone was looking at. I didn't move right away. That's the part people don't talk about. Not the revenge, not the moment it flips. The pause before it happens. Because in that pause, everything tries to pull you back into who you were trained to be. Quiet, obedient, grateful for scraps of respect. My mother was still smiling at the head table like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just helped display my life like a warning label. My father was already reaching for his glass again, dismissing it, compartmentalizing it, filing it under not my problem. Vanessa still had the mic in her hand, still waiting for the room to come back to her. But the room wasn't hers anymore. It was stuck. On me. On those words. On the silence after the laughter dies and everyone realizes they might have gone too far, but no one knows how to fix it. Mrs. Whitfield's hand stayed on my shoulder. "You don't owe them this," she said again, quieter this time. I finally looked at her, and I said, "I know." My phone buzzed again. Jolene. One word. That was all she needed. One word, and the entire system we built would stop being invisible. One word, and the deal that my family had been quietly depending on, without ever saying it out loud, would collapse in real time. I looked up at the screen, at my life weaponized, at 200 people pretending they hadn't just participated in it. And I thought about something very simple. They didn't invite me here to heal anything. They invited me here because they believed I would still be the version of me that accepts it. The one who stays seated. The one who absorbs it. The one who disappears quietly afterward. I wasn't that person anymore. I lowered my phone just slightly. Not typing yet, just holding it, letting the weight of the room settle fully. Vanessa noticed my movement. Her smile flickered. "What?" she said into the mic, voice tightening. "Is there a problem?" I looked at her. For the first time that night, I didn't feel small looking back at my family. I felt finished with them. Behind her, the slideshow still burned on the screen like a mistake no one could undo fast enough. Behind me, the exit doors were wide open. In front of me, every person who had ever decided who I was finally paying attention. And in my hand was the only thing in that room that actually had power. I typed one word, not because I was emotional, not because I was breaking, but because everything had already been broken a long time ago. I pressed send. He leaned forward like the screen had just said something in a language he finally understood. "Wait," he muttered. "Crestline? That Crestline?" His wife frowned. "What Crestline?" But he wasn't listening anymore. On the screen, the third slide appeared. Broke? A timeline, $83 in cash at age 17. 2 jobs, 3 years of night classes, then a financial graph. Slow at first, then rising, then accelerating. Crestline's first property, then second. Then multiple acquisitions stacked like proof instead of effort. A line that didn't look like luck. It looked like discipline. The room wasn't laughing anymore. It was recalculating. Vanessa stepped back from the mic slightly. "What is this?" she said again, but quieter now. Not performative. Uncertain. The fourth slide hit. Failure? A list appeared, not insults. Achievements, project completions, revenue growth, team expansion. Then a headline from a local business journal. Ridgemont firm disrupts regional development market. A few heads turned now, not toward Vanessa's, toward me. Someone whispered my name, not like a joke this time, like a question. At the head table, my mother's smile had vanished completely. My father lowered his phone. For the first time all night, he looked unsettled. Not angry, not dismissive. Unsettled. because this didn't fit the version of me he had been carrying for 15 years. The fifth slide arrived. Divorced. Single line, no explanation, no joke. Just one sentence, personal circumstances unrelated to professional performance. And then, below it, something that made the room change temperature. A photograph of Crestline's headquarters. Glass, steel, real. Something built, not survived. Built. A man near the bar stood up slightly. Holy, he started, then stopped himself. Because now people were afraid to speak too loudly. Like the room itself had become unstable. The sixth slide came in slower than the rest. Infertile? No words this time. Just a pause. Then a statement. Medical privacy is not a public punchline. Silence. Not polite silence. Real silence. The kind that presses against your ears. Vanessa's hand tightened around the mic. This isn't, she started. This is hacked. This is not. But no one was looking at her anymore. They were looking at the screen. And then at me. Because the final slide wasn't an insult. It was a mirror. A list of contracts. Projects. Financial partnerships. Names of firms. Including one that made Frank Patterson stop laughing completely. Patterson Construction. And beneath it, letter of intent. Withdrawn. Frank stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. What did you do? He said out loud. Not to Vanessa, not to the room, to me. My mother turned her head slowly, like she was seeing me for the first time in 15 years and realizing she had been wrong about the scale of everything. My father didn't speak. Derek took one step back from Vanessa. Just one. But it was enough, because in that step I saw it. The moment he understood he had married into something he never actually understood. And Vanessa finally looked at me without performance. With control, without certainty, just fear. I stayed seated, calm, still. Not because I was unaffected, but because I no longer needed to move to be heard. And for the first time that night, the room wasn't waiting for the next show. It was waiting for me. Not fast, not dramatic. Just enough so there was no confusion about who he was talking to. Yes, I said. That single word landed harder than anything else in the room that night. Frank blinked once, then again. Because now, the story he had built in his head for 4 months, the one where Crestline was just a faceless company with a strong balance sheet, was collapsing in real time. You never said, he started. I never met you, I replied. That stopped him. Because it was true. Across the room, I could feel the shift spreading. People were no longer watching the wedding. They were watching the transaction underneath it. Vanessa finally found her voice again, but it came out thin. Dad, what is he talking about? Frank didn't answer her. He was still staring at me. Like he was trying to match the woman at table 14 with the signature on a multi-million-dollar letter of intent. My mother stepped forward again, her voice rising. Thea, stop this right now. You are embarrassing your sister. I turned slightly toward her, not angry, just finished. No, I said. She did that herself when she decided humiliation was entertainment. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Because now it wasn't a joke, it wasn't a roast. It was a room realizing it had participated in something it couldn't unsee. Derek finally spoke, low and controlled. Frank? Is this real? Frank didn't look at him. He was still looking at me. Yes, I said again before anyone else could speak. Maplewood Commons, Crestline is the developer. Your company was selected as general contractor based on performance, pricings, and timeline capacity. A pause. Then I added, quietly, and the letter of intent was just withdrawn. That sentence changed the air completely. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It just removed the ground from under the room. Frank's face tightened. You can't just, this is a partnership? It was, I said, and silence. This one heavier, more expensive. Vanessa looked between me and her father, her confidence finally cracking. Dad, what is happening? Frank still didn't answer her, because now he understood the real problem. It wasn't the wedding anymore. It was leverage, and he had just lost his. My father finally stood up, slowly, like his body was reacting before his pride could stop it. Thea, he said, and for the first time in years my name didn't sound dismissive. It sounded uncertain. What have you done? I looked at him, really looked. The same man who had once said I would figure it out. The same man who had taken my future and called it practical. I built something, I said, a beat. And you spent 15 years pretending I didn't. No one interrupted. Not Vanessa, not my mother, not the room. Because there was nothing left in the script for them to say. Jolene's voice came through my phone in my pocket, barely audible. One word, she had said earlier. But now I didn't need it anymore. I set the phone on the table again, screen up. And I didn't type anything else. Because the system had already switched. And for the first time in a very long time, everyone in that room was finally looking at me without laughing. Mrs. Whitfield didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Funny thing about that, she continued calmly, I still have Thesa's records from that year. Attendance, grades, counselor notes. The room went still in a different way now, not shocked, focused, like everyone had just been handed evidence instead of gossip. She didn't drop out, Mrs. Whitfield said. She was removed. A small murmur ran through the crowd. My mother let out a short, sharp laugh. No, that's not true. But her voice didn't carry confidence. It carried instinct. Denial before truth could settle. Mrs. Whitfield turned slightly toward her. It is true, Gloria, she said gently. And you know it. That sentence hit harder than anything on the screen. Because it wasn't accusation, it was memory. Frank Patterson rubbed his forehead slowly. The anger was still there, but it had shifted shape now. It wasn't aimed at me anymore. It was aimed at the situation he had stepped into. A deal collapsing, a family unraveling, and reputation shifting under his feet. Derek stood completely still now, looking at Vanessa like he was seeing a stranger for the first time. You told me she just left, he said quietly. You said she walked away from everything, Vanessa's voice cracked. That's what I was told. By who? He asked. Silence. Because everyone already knew the answer, my mother didn't speak. My father didn't move. But the room had already filled in the gap. Mrs. Whitfield stepped closer to the front tables. I watched her work 3 jobs, she said. I watched her study in a diner at 4 a.m. I watched her take exams after night shifts. And I watched her graduate at the top of her class, while no one from her family showed up. Her gaze moved across the room. One version of Thea Lindgren is what you were shown tonight, she said. A pause, and one version is real. She turned slightly toward me now, and I think you all just met her. No one clapped, no one moved, because applause would have felt wrong. Too small for what had just been corrected. Frank finally exhaled, long and slow, like he'd been holding his breath since the first slide changed. This deal, he said quieter now, this project, it's built on assumptions. I met his eyes. No, I said, it was built on trust. You just learned who you placed it in. That was the difference. Not anger, clarity. Vanessa stepped down from the stage without realizing it, the mic still in her hand. She looked around the room like she was expecting someone to reset everything. But no one did. Because there was nothing left to reset. My father finally spoke again, barely audible. Thea, I turned toward him, not waiting, not hoping, just listening. And for the first time in my life, the silence between us wasn't filled with excuses. It was filled with everything he never said. It started the next morning, not quietly, not slowly. It detonated, just like I said. By 7:12 a.m., my name was already circulating through group chats, office break rooms, and Sunday church whispers that hadn't even waited for Sunday. At 7:30, someone had uploaded a shaky video of the screen at Oak Ridge Country Club. By 8:00, it had a title. Wedding slideshow and turns into corporate exposure incident. By 9:09, people weren't asking what happened anymore. They were asking who she is. And that's when everything changed tone. Not because of drama, because of scale. At Crestline, Jolene was already on it. She sent one message, "We're getting calls." Then another, Good ones. I didn't answer right away. I just sat in my apartment with a cup of coffee I wasn't really drinking, watching the world try to rebuild the story it thought it knew about me. Because that's what people do when their assumptions break. They don't apologize first. They rearrange. My phone rang number. I answered. A man's voice, careful, measured. This is Frank Patterson. I didn't say anything, he continued. I owe you an apology, not as a contractor, as a father of a groom, as someone who, he paused, like he didn't like the shape of the sentence he was building, misjudged the situation. I'm listening, I said, a long exhale on his end. I'd like to salvage the Maplewood project, if that's still possible. Under revised terms, full transparency, direct reporting, whatever conditions you require. There it was. Not emotion, not pride. Adjustment. I looked out my window, the same sky from last night. Different world underneath it. I'll consider it, I said. That's all I can ask, he replied. And then he added something quieter. For what it's worth, I didn't know what they did to you. I believe you, I said. Because I did. But it didn't change anything that mattered. After I hung up, I finally opened Derek's message again. I'm sorry, I didn't know about the slideshow until it played. I should have stopped it. For a moment, I just stared at it. Not angry, not softened. Just done sorting responsibility that didn't belong to me anymore. I typed back, you should have known your family better. Then I deleted it and didn't reply at all. By noon, Crestline had 3 new partnership inquiries. By evening, it had 7. By the next morning, it had journalists calling, not for gossip anymore, for context. For the version of the story that actually held up under daylight. And my mother. She called once. I let it ring out. Then again, I didn't answer that either. Because some doors don't need to slam to close. Some just stop opening. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting on anyone inside that room to decide who I was allowed to be. I already knew. Thursday didn't feel like escalation. It felt like consequence catching up. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just organized. At 6:41 a.m., Jolene forwarded me a message thread from Crestline's legal inbox. Multiple inbound inquiries regarding Maplewood Commons ownership verification. At 7:15, a regional development blog posted an article that was less reporting and more nervous summary. Unknown developer behind Maplewood Commons becomes topic of local industry speculation. At 8:03, Frank Patterson's attorney sent a formal request for good faith renegotiation discussions. At 9:10, I finally saw something I didn't expect. A public statement, not from Frank, from Vanessa, posted on her social media, carefully written, carefully late. I want to clarify that the slideshow at my wedding was meant as humor and was not intended to harm anyone. I love my sister and regret any misunderstanding. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down. Not because it mattered, but because it didn't change anything anymore. At Crestline, the team was already moving forward. Maplewood wasn't paused. It was just being reevaluated through a different lens now. One where we held leverage instead of urgency. Jolene called me mid-morning. I have something, she said. What kind of something? A pause. Your mother has been calling vendors. That made me sit up slightly. Which vendors? Event planners, local contractors, even one of our subcontractors. She's trying to clarify your intentions about Crestline. I exhaled slowly. Of course she is. She's also telling people Frank is being unfairly targeted, Jolene added. It's not landing well. I didn't think it would. Another pause. Then Jolene. Softer. Are you okay with how big this is getting? I looked out my kitchen window. At a normal street. A normal morning. A life that had quietly become anything but normal. I didn't start it, I said. I know, she replied. That was the end of that conversation. By noon, Frank Patterson showed up in person, not at Crestline, at my office building. Security called me first. Mr. Patterson is insisting on waiting in the lobby. I told them to let him wait. Not out of cruelty, out of structure. Because now for the first time, he was the one without access. When I finally walked down, he stood immediately. No confidence left in his posture, just urgency. Thea, he said, we need to fix this. I stopped a few feet away. There's nothing broken that I didn't already warn you about. He ran a hand through his hair. I overextended. I admit that. But I can't absorb this loss. My company, my employees. You made those decisions before you ever saw my name, I said. His jaw tightened. This is still salvageable. I tilted my head slightly. Not the way you want it to be. Silence. Then, quieter. What do you want? That question landed differently, because it wasn't defensive anymore. It was real. I considered it for a moment. Not emotionally, practically. I want Maplewood built, I said, on schedule, on budget, with accountability built into every layer of your work. And my company? Survives your decisions, I said, not your assumptions. He nodded slowly, like a man accepting terms he didn't expect to hear. I'll agree to whatever structure you set. Good, I said. Then I added, and Frank. He looked up. Next time you enter a deal, enter it based on signatures, not optimism. He didn't argue because there was nothing left to argue against. That afternoon, I got one more message. From Vanessa. Not public this time. Private. Just 3 lines. I didn't think it would go this far. I'm sorry. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed it without replying. Not out of anger, but because some conversations don't restart where they left off. They start over completely, and not everyone earns that reset. Outside, the world kept moving. Contracts were revised. Stories were rewritten. People picked sides, then quietly picked new ones. And for the first time since that night at Oak Ridge Country Club, I wasn't reacting to the story anymore. I was the one deciding what came next. I've been thinking, he said finally. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Not older, just less defended. That night. He paused again, like the sentence itself was something heavy he had to carry carefully. At the reception. I didn't understand what I was watching until it was already happening. I didn't respond as not because I didn't hear him, because I did. And I was waiting to see if he would do what he had always done. Explain it away, redirect it, minimize it until it disappeared. But he didn't. I saw your mother, he continued. I saw Vanessa, and I saw you standing there. And I realized I had spent a long time believing that staying out of things was the same as not being responsible for them. The silence between us stretched. No television noise to fill it. No one else speaking for him. Just him. I should have said something years ago, he added. When things started. When you were younger. I told myself I was keeping peace in the house. But I think I was just avoiding being uncomfortable. That landed differently than anything else he had ever said to me. Because it wasn't about blame, it was about admission. I looked out at my yard while I listened. At a life that didn't require permission anymore. I don't need you to rewrite it now, I said quietly. I know, he replied immediately. I'm not trying to. A pause. Then, more carefully, I just didn't want you to think I didn't see eventually. Eventually. That word sat there, imperfect, late, but real. I took a breath. I think for a long time, I said, I didn't need you to see it. I needed you to be there when it mattered. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. That was new. I can't change that, he said. No, I agreed. You can't. Another silence. Different from the old ones. Less avoidance, more recognition. Then he said something I didn't expect. I heard about Maplewood, he said. People are talking about it. They always are, I replied. A faint exhale that might have been a laugh, or might have been regret. I'm proud of you, he said. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I needed time to process it, but because I was checking whether it changed anything inside me. It didn't erase anything. It didn't fix anything, but it also didn't feel like a performance. So I said the only honest thing I had. Okay. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement that I had heard him. That seemed to be enough for him, for now. We stayed on the line a little longer after that. No more big statements. No history rewritten. Just two people speaking carefully around everything they had failed to be to each other. When we finally hung up, I set the phone down on the porch step and leaned back in the chair. The air was cool. The sky was turning that soft, quiet color it only gets when the day is done pretending to matter. And for the first time, I realized something simple. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an apology that fixed everything. Not for a family that became different versions of itself. Not for a room where I finally got seated somewhere other than table 14. My life had already moved. And this time, I had moved with it. He sends things like, saw your company's business journal, looked good, or cold snap coming. Take care of yourself. Nothing heavy. Nothing that tries to reopen doors I've already closed. Jolene says that's his way of learning how to exist in my life without taking it over. I think she's right. As for me, I still live in the same place, still drink tea on the same porch. But the difference now is that the silence isn't empty anymore, it's mine. Maplewood Commons broke ground and never stopped moving. Foundations went in on schedule. Framing followed, then roofing. Then, streets that didn't exist a year ago started appearing on maps like they had always been there. Families now walk the site during open previews. Kids point at future backyards. Couples argue over kitchen layouts. No one knows my story when they sign the papers, and that's exactly how I want it. Jolene still runs Crestline with me, still the only person who talks to me like I'm both a CEO and a human being at the same time. Sometimes she still says things like, "You realize you accidentally became the version of yourself people warn their kids about, right?" And I usually say, "Good. I was getting tired of being the cautionary tale." She laughs every time. But there's something I don't always say out loud. Not to her, not to my father, not even to myself on most days. It's this. I didn't win because I destroyed them. I won because I stopped letting them define what winning even was. There are still moments, quiet ones, where I think about that room. The laughter, the screen, the pause before I stood up. But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. It feels distant, like a story someone else once told about a version of me that was still waiting to be chosen. Now, I don't wait, I build. And sometimes, late in the evening, when the light hits just right and the porch goes quiet again, I think about those 6 words they used like a verdict. Infertile, divorced, failure, dropout, broke, alone. And I realize something simple. They were never a sentence. They were just the moment I stopped accepting theirs and started writing my own. The porch light is on now. Same chair, same tea gone slightly cold because I forgot to drink it while thinking. Some stories end with noise. Others end with silence that feels like it finally belongs to you. Mine ended somewhere in between. Crestline didn't just expand in size, it changed shape. Foundation Forward started small. Just a few workshops at first. Women who thought they were too late, too broken, too far behind. They came in carrying labels like I once did. We didn't erase them. We just set them down and got to work anyway. Jolene says, "The program is the most important thing we've ever built." I don't argue. Because she's probably right. My father still texts. My mother doesn't. Vanessa sometimes shows up in conversations that aren't really about her. I hear she's learning how to sit with discomfort instead of performing through it. I hope that's true. I don't check. Derek and Vanessa are still together, not healed, not fixed. Just trying. Some things don't get rewritten, they get lived through. Frank Patterson rebuilt his company in a smaller way. Safer now. Slower. He doesn't overextend anymore. I think that part of him finally learned something it should have known before Maplewood ever broke ground. As for me, I don't measure my life in who's still upset with me or who finally understands me. I measure it in mornings where I wake up and don't feel like I'm negotiating my own worth just to exist in the day. That's new, and it's enough. Sometimes people ask Jolene what I'm like now. She usually says, still intense, still focused, just no longer apologizing for taking up space. And I think that's fair, because the truth is, I didn't become someone new. I just stopped being someone they could shrink. So if you're still reading this, still here at the end, I'll leave you with something simple. Not advice. Just reflection I had one night on this same porch. You can survive being misunderstood for a long time, but you don't have to build your life around being understood by the people who benefited from misunderstanding you. There are other rooms, other tables, other versions of your story that don't begin with permission. Mine began the moment I stopped waiting for mine. And I haven't sat at table 14 since.